August 7th, 1942, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The tropical darkness pressed against the American perimeter like a living thing, thick with humidity and the constant buzz of insects. Marine Private Danny Rodriguez crouched behind his sandbag fortification, M1 Garand clutched in sweaty palms, straining his ears for any sound that didn't belong. Somewhere out there in the jungle, he knew Japanese soldiers were moving through the shadows, planning their next infiltration attempt. What Rodriguez didn't realize was that he possessed a secret weapon more powerful than any rifle or machine gun, a weapon forged not from steel, but from the fundamental structure of human speech itself. Within hours, this linguistic advantage would mean the difference between life and death for countless Marines defending this strategic airfield in the Solomon Islands. The challenge facing American forces was unlike anything they had encountered before. Japanese infiltrators weren't just sneaking through jungle vegetation under cover of darkness. They were speaking English, wearing captured American uniforms, and attempting to walk directly through security checkpoints with forged identification papers. In the chaos of tropical warfare, where visibility dropped to mere feet in dense vegetation, how could sentries distinguish between genuine Marines and enemy soldiers masquerading as friendlies? The answer lay hidden in a single letter of the alphabet, a letter that would expose the most carefully prepared Japanese infiltrator in seconds, regardless of their English vocabulary or military knowledge. This discovery would revolutionize security procedures throughout the Pacific Theater and demonstrate how the deepest patterns of human language acquisition could become instruments of warfare. Master Technical Sergeant James Herbert landed with the first wave of Marines on August 7th. As a combat correspondent, Herbert witnessed the immediate security challenges that emerged as American forces secured the nearly completed Japanese airfield. Within days, it became clear that traditional identification methods were failing catastrophically. Japanese forces demonstrated remarkable tactical flexibility, launching sophisticated infiltration operations that exploited every weakness in American defensive procedures. The enemy moved with ghost-like precision through terrain they knew intimately. They attached jungle vegetation to their uniforms for camouflage. Some spoke conversational English, learned during peacetime education or through contact with Western missionaries. They carried captured documents and wore American equipment taken from casualties. Most disturbing of all, they understood American military procedures well enough to mimic standard protocols and terminology. Standard security measures proved inadequate against such sophisticated deception. Visual identification was nearly impossible in jungle darkness. Documents could be forged or stolen. Physical appearance meant little when both sides included soldiers of various ethnic backgrounds. Even extended conversation could be deceiving when infiltrators had studied American military language and customs. American commanders needed something that couldn't be faked, something that revealed identity through characteristics beyond conscious control. The solution emerged from careful observation of how Japanese soldiers pronounced English words. Marines began noticing consistent patterns in the way enemy infiltrators spoke, patterns that persisted even among those with otherwise excellent English skills. The breakthrough came from understanding fundamental differences between Japanese and English sound systems. Japanese possesses only one liquid sound, something linguistically classified as an alveolar tap. Native Japanese speakers produce this sound by quickly touching their tongue to the ridge behind their upper teeth. English, by contrast, uses two completely different liquid sounds that occupy distinct positions in the mouth and brain. The English L sound requires placing the tongue tip firmly against that same ridge, while allowing air to flow around the sides. The American R sound pulls the tongue back without touching the roof of the mouth at all. These sounds are as different to English speakers as night and day, but to Japanese speakers both fall into a single, perceptual category established during childhood language development. This wasn't a matter of hearing ability or intelligence. Japanese speakers could physically produce both sounds with proper training. They could hear acoustic differences when sounds were presented in isolation. The problem was perceptual and automatic. When processing actual speech, Japanese brains categorized both English sounds as instances of their single native liquid sound. Marines discovered this linguistic reality through trial and error in the field. Sentries began using passwords that contained multiple L sounds, creating pronunciation challenges that even educated Japanese speakers found nearly impossible to overcome. The test exploited something infiltrators couldn't consciously control: their automatic pronunciation patterns developed during early childhood. When a sentry challenged an approaching figure with a password containing L sounds, native English speakers pronounced it correctly without thinking. Japanese speakers, regardless of their English education, typically substituted sounds closer to their native liquid pronunciation. This created distinctly wrong pronunciations that trained American ears could detect immediately. The effectiveness of this approach relied on how humans acquire language during childhood. The brain develops perceptual categories for native language sounds that remain remarkably stable throughout life. These patterns resist modification even with extensive adult training and conscious effort. Under stress, fatigue, or time pressure, automatic pronunciation habits emerge regardless of the speaker's intentions or preparation. One specific word entered the historical record through journalist Oliver Gramling's 1942 account. According to Gramling, sentries would challenge suspicious individuals with the word Lollapalooza, an American slang term meaning something outstanding or extraordinary. The word contained 4 L sounds in rapid succession, creating an almost impossible pronunciation test for Japanese speakers. Instructions were reportedly given to listen specifically to the first 2 syllables. If those came back sounding like Rora instead of Lolla, sentries would open fire without waiting to hear the remainder. This tactical approach made perfect sense, reducing exposure time during challenges while providing clear pronunciation evidence. The word Lollapalooza represented an ideal choice for pronunciation testing. Each L sound appeared at the beginning of syllables, the most difficult position for Japanese speakers to master. The rapid succession of these sounds created cumulative difficulty that even extensive English training couldn't overcome. Most importantly, the word was distinctly American slang that infiltrators would be unlikely to encounter in formal English education. Henderson Field became the testing ground for these linguistic security measures. The airfield, captured on August 8th and renamed after a Marine aviator killed at Midway, represented the strategic prize that both sides desperately wanted to control. Japanese forces launched repeated attempts to recapture it, employing every tactical innovation they could devise. Security around the airfield perimeter became a deadly serious chess game. Japanese infiltrators demonstrated incredible skill and determination, sometimes working individually, sometimes in small groups. They studied American procedures meticulously. They practiced English phrases and military terminology. They prepared forged documents and acquired American equipment through battlefield recovery. But they couldn't overcome the fundamental patterns of their native language phonology. No matter how carefully they prepared, the automatic pronunciation habits established during childhood betrayed them when challenged with L-heavy passwords. The human brain's language processing system, evolved over millions of years to efficiently categorize speech sounds, became their insurmountable obstacle. The Marines who developed these procedures deserve recognition for remarkable practical innovation. Without understanding the underlying linguistics, they identified and exploited a genuine weakness in enemy capabilities. They transformed abstract knowledge about language differences into concrete tactical advantage. Most importantly, they created a security measure that was simple, effective, and nearly impossible to counterfeit. This discovery would spread throughout American forces in the Pacific, becoming part of standard operating procedures for identifying potential infiltrators. The implications extended far beyond Guadalcanal, influencing security protocols in subsequent campaigns and demonstrating how language itself could become a weapon of war. The psychological impact of these pronunciation tests extended far beyond their tactical effectiveness. Japanese infiltrators who had spent months preparing for their missions, memorizing American military procedures, and practicing English conversation, found themselves undone by something as simple as saying Lollapalooza correctly. The frustration must have been devastating. Here were soldiers who could discuss baseball statistics, quote American movies, and navigate complex military terminology, yet they couldn't pronounce a single slang word without exposing themselves as enemy combatants. Marine sentries quickly learned to listen for these telltale pronunciation patterns. The human ear, when trained to detect specific sounds, becomes remarkably sensitive to subtle variations. Guards who might struggle to identify forged documents or detect camouflaged movement could instantly recognize the difference between a native English speaker saying Lollapalooza and a Japanese speaker's approximation of the same word. The training process for American forces was surprisingly simple. Officers would gather their men and demonstrate the pronunciation differences using volunteer Japanese-American soldiers when available, or by mimicking the typical substitutions themselves. Marines learned that Japanese speakers would typically transform the initial L sounds into something closer to R sounds, creating pronunciations like Roraparuza instead of Lollapalooza. But the effectiveness of this system created new challenges for American forces. Filipino scouts and soldiers, fighting alongside American units, also faced difficulties with certain English pronunciations, though their struggles were different from those of Japanese speakers. Filipino languages contained L and R sounds, but the specific mouth positions and tongue movements required for American English sometimes proved challenging for speakers whose native languages use slightly different articulations. This led to tragic incidents where Filipino allies were initially challenged or detained by overzealous American sentries. The solution required additional training for American forces to distinguish between the pronunciation patterns of various Allied nationalities and those of Japanese infiltrators. Sentries learned to listen for specific types of mispronunciation rather than any deviation from perfect American English. The most remarkable aspect of the pronunciation testing system was its resistance to countermeasures. Japanese intelligence services, aware that their infiltrators were being detected through speech patterns, attempted various solutions. They tried training soldiers with intensive English pronunciation drills. They recruited individuals who had lived in English-speaking countries. They even attempted to use Korean or Chinese soldiers who might have different linguistic backgrounds. None of these countermeasures proved consistently effective. The pronunciation patterns established during early childhood proved virtually impossible to modify completely, even with intensive training. Soldiers who could master the pronunciation in practice sessions under relaxed conditions would revert to native patterns under the stress of actual infiltration attempts. Japanese forces also tried using passwords they had captured or overheard, hoping to bypass the pronunciation challenge entirely. But American security procedures evolved rapidly to counter this threat. Passwords changed frequently, sometimes daily. Multiple challenge-response sequences were implemented. Most importantly, the system incorporated random elements that prevented infiltrators from memorizing specific responses. The word Lollapalooza itself became part of Marine Corps legend, though its actual usage may have been more limited than later accounts suggested. Different units developed their own preferred challenge words, often incorporating local slang or military terminology specific to their region or branch of service. The key was always maintaining words with multiple L sounds that created pronunciation difficulties for Japanese speakers. Some units experimented with phrases rather than single words, creating longer pronunciation challenges that were even more difficult to master. Phrases like "Lucky Larry's lily-white laundry" or "Lovely Linda's little lollipops" provided extended sequences of L sounds that compounded the difficulty for non-native speakers. These longer challenges also allowed sentries more time to evaluate pronunciation patterns and make identification decisions. The system's success led to its adoption throughout the Pacific Theater, though each campaign presented unique challenges. On different islands with varying terrain and tactical situations, pronunciation testing had to be adapted to local conditions. In some cases, the challenges needed to be whispered to avoid detection by enemy forces. In others, they had to be shouted over the noise of artillery bombardments. The human cost of infiltration attempts was significant on both sides. Japanese soldiers who failed pronunciation tests were typically killed immediately, as the tactical situation rarely allowed for capture and interrogation. These were often highly trained individuals who had volunteered for extremely dangerous missions, knowing that discovery meant almost certain death. For American forces, successful infiltrations could be catastrophic. Japanese soldiers who penetrated defensive perimeters could sabotage equipment, misdirect reinforcements, or gather intelligence about American positions and capabilities. Some infiltrators carried explosives for suicide attacks against critical installations. Others attempted to assassinate officers or destroy communications equipment. The stakes of these midnight encounters were always life or death. Sentries who hesitated or made incorrect identification decisions could doom their entire unit. The pressure on young Marines manning isolated guard posts was enormous, knowing that a single mistake in judgment could have devastating consequences. Yet the pronunciation testing system provided these sentries with confidence and clarity in making split-second decisions. Instead of relying on gut instincts or partial visual identification in darkness, they had a reliable method for distinguishing friend from foe. This psychological advantage was almost as valuable as the tactical effectiveness of the system itself. The broader implications of linguistic security measures extended beyond immediate battlefield applications. Military intelligence services began studying language patterns more systematically, recognizing that speech analysis could provide valuable information about enemy personnel and capabilities. This research would eventually influence post-war developments in forensic linguistics and voice identification technologies. The success of pronunciation testing also demonstrated the value of practical innovation at the tactical level. The Marines who first noticed Japanese pronunciation difficulties weren't linguists or language experts. They were combat soldiers who observed patterns, recognized opportunities, and developed solutions to immediate problems. Their innovation saved lives and contributed to strategic success in the Pacific Campaign. The intelligence value of failed infiltration attempts proved equally significant. When Japanese soldiers were captured alive after failing pronunciation tests, interrogations revealed extensive details about enemy training methods, preparation procedures, and tactical objectives. These captives provided insights into how thoroughly Japanese forces studied American military culture and language. Interrogation reports documented the remarkable extent of Japanese preparation for infiltration missions. Some soldiers had memorized American baseball statistics, knowing that sports knowledge often came up in casual conversation between American troops. Others had studied American regional accents, attempting to mimic speech patterns from specific states or cities. A few had even practiced American military slang and profanity, understanding that authentic casual speech required more than formal English vocabulary. Despite these sophisticated preparations, the pronunciation barrier remained insurmountable. Captured infiltrators consistently reported that they had practiced individual English words extensively, but the automatic speech patterns of their native language reasserted themselves under operational stress. One prisoner described spending weeks drilling English pronunciation with a Japanese instructor who had lived in California, only to find himself reverting to familiar sounds when challenged by an American sentry. The psychological warfare aspects of pronunciation testing created ripple effects throughout Japanese forces. Word spread among enemy units that American sentries possessed an almost supernatural ability to detect infiltrators through speech analysis. This reputation enhanced the deterrent effect of the system, discouraging some infiltration attempts before they began. Japanese military communications intercepted by American codebreakers revealed discussions about the American language trap that was claiming increasing numbers of their most skilled infiltrators. Some Japanese commanders expressed frustration that soldiers who excelled at every other aspect of infiltration training consistently failed when confronted with specific English pronunciation challenges. The system's effectiveness varied by individual, creating unpredictable results that frustrated Japanese tactical planning. Occasionally, a Japanese soldier with unusual linguistic background or exceptional mimicry abilities would successfully pass pronunciation challenges, creating false confidence among enemy commanders. These rare successes led to increased infiltration attempts, which in turn resulted in higher casualty rates when most attempts failed. American forces adapted their pronunciation testing techniques based on battlefield experience. Sentries learned to vary their challenge words, sometimes using multiple tests in sequence to confirm identification. They developed backup procedures for situations where initial pronunciation seemed ambiguous. Most importantly, they learned to trust their trained ears, recognizing that subtle pronunciation differences were reliable indicators even when infiltrators demonstrated otherwise excellent English skills. The training of American sentries became increasingly sophisticated as the war progressed. Experienced Marines who had successfully identified multiple infiltrators became instructors, teaching newer troops to recognize specific pronunciation patterns. These veteran sentries could distinguish between various types of mispronunciation, identifying not just Japanese speakers, but sometimes determining regional backgrounds or educational levels based on speech characteristics. Medical personnel treating wounded prisoners provided additional insights into the infiltration program. Japanese soldiers captured after failed pronunciation tests often showed signs of extensive physical conditioning and specialized training. Their equipment revealed careful preparation, including American-manufactured items, forged documents of remarkable quality, and detailed maps of American positions. The economic cost of failed infiltration attempts represented a significant drain on Japanese resources. Each infiltrator represented months of training, specialized equipment, and careful preparation. The loss of these highly trained soldiers to pronunciation testing meant that Japan was losing valuable human resources while gaining little intelligence benefit in return. Combat engineers discovered that some infiltration attempts involved remarkably sophisticated preparations. Japanese forces had constructed detailed mock-ups of American positions for training purposes. They had studied captured American equipment to understand its operation and maintenance. Some infiltrators carried tools for sabotage operations that demonstrated advanced technical knowledge. The counterintelligence implications of pronunciation testing extended beyond immediate battlefield security. American intelligence services realized that speech pattern analysis could be applied to captured documents, radio intercepts, and prisoner interrogations. Japanese soldiers who spoke English often revealed information about their backgrounds, training locations, and unit assignments through subtle linguistic characteristics. Psychological studies of captured infiltrators revealed the intense mental pressure created by pronunciation testing. Soldiers who had volunteered for extremely dangerous missions, accepting the likelihood of death in combat, found themselves undone by something as simple as saying an English word correctly. This psychological defeat often proved more demoralizing than physical capture. The ripple effects of successful pronunciation testing influenced Japanese tactical doctrine throughout the Pacific Campaign. Enemy forces began avoiding infiltration tactics in areas where American security procedures had proven effective. This tactical adjustment forced Japanese commanders to rely more heavily on direct assault methods, often resulting in higher casualty rates for their forces. Naval intelligence reports documented attempts by Japanese forces to recruit individuals with English language backgrounds for infiltration missions. These efforts included approaching prisoners of war, attempting to coerce civilians in occupied territories, and seeking volunteers among populations with Western educational exposure. The limited success of these recruitment efforts demonstrated the rarity of individuals who could pass American pronunciation tests. The scientific implications of pronunciation testing began attracting attention from military researchers and academic linguists. The systematic nature of speech pattern differences between languages suggested possibilities for broader applications in intelligence work, prisoner identification, and communication security. This research would eventually contribute to post-war developments in forensic linguistics and voice analysis technologies. Training manuals developed during the campaign codified pronunciation testing procedures for use throughout American forces. These documents provided standardized challenge words, described typical mispronunciation patterns, and outlined procedures for handling ambiguous cases. The manuals emphasized that pronunciation testing was one tool among many, not a foolproof solution to all security challenges. The human stories behind pronunciation testing revealed both the ingenuity of American forces and the determination of Japanese infiltrators. Each failed infiltration attempt represented a personal tragedy for Japanese soldiers who had accepted dangerous missions in service to their country. Each successful identification represented lives saved among American defenders who might otherwise have fallen victim to sabotage or surprise attack. The legacy of linguistic security measures developed during the Pacific Campaign influenced American military doctrine for decades. The recognition that language characteristics could provide reliable identification tools led to expanded research into voice analysis, accent identification, and speech pattern recognition. These innovations would prove valuable in subsequent conflicts where similar identification challenges arose. The story of pronunciation testing demonstrates how warfare drives innovation in unexpected directions. The development of linguistic security measures required no advanced technology, expensive equipment, or lengthy research programs. It emerged from careful observation, practical experimentation, and the willingness of combat soldiers to try new approaches to immediate problems. The effectiveness of pronunciation testing reached its peak during the brutal months that followed the initial landing. As Japanese forces launched increasingly desperate attempts to recapture Henderson Field, the linguistic barriers protecting American positions became more sophisticated and deadly. Marine units developed elaborate challenge systems that went far beyond simple password exchanges, creating multi-layered pronunciation traps that even the most carefully prepared infiltrators couldn't navigate successfully. Sergeant Michael O'Sullivan, a Boston native with the 3rd Battalion, discovered that regional American accents could provide additional security layers. His thick Boston pronunciation of words like "park the car" created challenges that Japanese infiltrators found virtually impossible to replicate. Other units began incorporating regional slang and dialect features, turning America's linguistic diversity into a tactical advantage. The psychological impact on Japanese forces became increasingly evident through intercepted communications and prisoner interrogations. Enemy commanders expressed growing frustration with the catastrophic failure rates of infiltration missions. Highly trained soldiers, who had mastered complex military procedures, memorized detailed intelligence about American positions, and prepared for months were being eliminated within seconds of encountering American sentries. Japanese training programs evolved desperately to counter these linguistic obstacles. Intelligence reports revealed that enemy forces had established specialized language schools where infiltrators practiced English pronunciation under simulated combat conditions. They employed instructors who had lived in America before the war, hoping to overcome the fundamental phonetic barriers that were claiming their best operatives. These countermeasures proved largely ineffective because they addressed symptoms rather than the underlying neurological reality of language acquisition. Japanese soldiers could achieve near-perfect pronunciation during relaxed practice sessions, but the stress of actual infiltration missions triggered automatic reversion to native speech patterns. The human brain's language processing system, evolved over millions of years, couldn't be reprogrammed through weeks of military training. American forces discovered that timing played a crucial role in pronunciation testing effectiveness. Challenges issued immediately upon contact proved most reliable, before infiltrators had time to prepare mentally for the linguistic test. Delayed challenges after extended conversation sometimes allowed skilled infiltrators to adjust their pronunciation patterns and achieve marginal success. The development of compound challenges created even more formidable barriers for enemy infiltrators. Instead of single words like Lollapalooza, sentries began using phrase combinations that required sustained pronunciation accuracy across multiple sounds and syllables. Challenges like Little Larry's Lovely Lily Pond or Lucky Linda Loaded Large Laundry Loads created extended pronunciation obstacles that compounded the difficulty exponentially. Medical officers treating American casualties began documenting the life-saving impact of pronunciation testing. Soldiers who might otherwise have been killed by successful infiltrators survived because linguistic security measures prevented enemy penetration of defensive positions. These medical reports provided concrete evidence of the system's tactical value beyond theoretical effectiveness. The integration of pronunciation testing with other security measures created comprehensive identification protocols that addressed multiple infiltration methods simultaneously. Visual inspection, document verification, knowledge of current passwords, and pronunciation testing combined to form layered defenses that proved extremely difficult for enemy forces to overcome through any single approach. Japanese forces attempted to exploit the system's reliance on specific challenge words by deploying listening posts near American positions. Enemy soldiers hoped to overhear current passwords and practice their pronunciation before attempting infiltration. American security procedures evolved rapidly to counter this threat through frequent password changes and randomized challenge protocols. The human cost of these linguistic cat-and-mouse games mounted steadily throughout the campaign. Japanese infiltrators, often volunteers who understood the near impossibility of survival, continued accepting these missions despite astronomical casualty rates. Their dedication reflected both personal courage and the desperate strategic situation facing Japanese forces throughout the Pacific. Combat photographers documented the aftermath of failed infiltration attempts, though many images remained classified for decades after the war. These photographs revealed the sophisticated equipment and careful preparation that went into Japanese infiltration missions, making the effectiveness of simple pronunciation testing even more remarkable by comparison. Intelligence analysis of captured infiltrator equipment provided insights into the extensive resources Japan devoted to these operations. Specialized camouflage materials, forged American documents of exceptional quality, captured American weapons and equipment, and detailed maps of American positions demonstrated the strategic importance Japan placed on infiltration tactics. The ripple effects of pronunciation testing success influenced broader tactical decisions by both sides. American commanders gained confidence in their perimeter security, allowing them to deploy forces more aggressively, knowing that infiltration threats were manageable. Japanese commanders increasingly avoided infiltration tactics in favor of direct assault methods, often resulting in higher casualty rates for their forces. Psychological warfare specialists recognize the morale impact of pronunciation testing on both friendly and enemy forces. American troops gained confidence from possessing a reliable method for identifying infiltrators, while Japanese forces faced the demoralizing reality that their most skilled operatives were being eliminated through simple linguistic tests. The scientific implications of pronunciation testing began attracting attention from military researchers studying human performance under combat conditions. The systematic nature of speech pattern differences between languages suggested broader applications for voice analysis and linguistic identification in intelligence operations. Training programs for American sentries became increasingly sophisticated as commanders recognized the critical importance of proper pronunciation testing techniques. Experienced Marines who had successfully identified multiple infiltrators became specialized instructors, teaching newer troops to recognize subtle speech patterns and pronunciation variations. Radio intercepts revealed Japanese attempts to recruit individuals with English language backgrounds for infiltration missions. These desperate measures included approaching prisoners of war, coercing civilians in occupied territories, and seeking volunteers among populations with Western educational exposure. The limited success of these recruitment efforts demonstrated the fundamental challenge facing Japanese forces. The counterintelligence value of failed infiltration attempts extended beyond immediate security benefits. Captured infiltrators provided extensive information about Japanese training methods, strategic objectives, and tactical capabilities. These intelligence windfalls often proved more valuable than preventing the individual infiltration attempts themselves. Engineering analysis of Japanese infiltration equipment revealed remarkable technical sophistication. Specialized tools for sabotage operations, communication devices for coordinating with enemy forces, and weapons designed for close-quarters combat demonstrated the advanced planning behind these missions. The economic drain of failed infiltration attempts represented a significant strategic cost for Japanese forces. Each failed mission consumed months of training, specialized equipment, and irreplaceable human resources, while providing no intelligence benefit in return. This resource wastage contributed to broader Japanese strategic difficulties throughout the Pacific Campaign. Medical studies of pronunciation testing effectiveness revealed physiological aspects of the speech recognition process. American sentries developed enhanced auditory sensitivity to specific sound patterns, demonstrating the human brain's remarkable ability to adapt to critical survival tasks under combat conditions. The integration of pronunciation testing with established military protocols required careful coordination to avoid friendly fire incidents. American forces developed supplementary identification procedures for situations involving Allied troops whose native languages created similar pronunciation challenges. Combat effectiveness reports documented the broader tactical advantages created by reliable infiltration detection. American units could maintain more aggressive patrol schedules, establish forward observation posts with greater confidence, and deploy smaller security details knowing that linguistic testing provided backup identification capabilities. The psychological profiles of successful infiltrators revealed common characteristics that helped American forces understand enemy selection criteria. Japanese commanders typically chose soldiers with demonstrated English language abilities, technical expertise for sabotage missions, and exceptional physical conditioning for jungle operations. Intelligence networks established by successful infiltrators before their eventual detection provided insights into Japanese information-gathering priorities. Enemy forces sought detailed information about American troop strengths, equipment capabilities, supply schedules, and defensive positions around Henderson Field. The evolution of pronunciation testing techniques throughout the campaign reflected the dynamic nature of tactical innovation under combat conditions. American forces continuously refined their methods based on battlefield experience, enemy countermeasures, and lessons learned from both successful and failed identification attempts. The strategic implications of pronunciation testing extended far beyond immediate battlefield applications. The systematic exploitation of linguistic differences for security purposes influenced American military doctrine for subsequent Pacific campaigns and demonstrated the value of unconventional approaches to tactical problems. The human drama behind each pronunciation test represented life or death decisions made in seconds under extreme pressure. American sentries faced the constant responsibility of distinguishing between friendly forces and enemy infiltrators, knowing that mistakes in either direction could have catastrophic consequences for their units. The documentation of pronunciation testing procedures in official military records ensured that these innovations would influence future security protocols throughout the American military. The systematic nature of the approach, combined with its proven effectiveness, made it a valuable addition to standard operating procedures for similar tactical situations. The legacy of linguistic security measures developed at Guadalcanal would extend far beyond the Pacific War, influencing military and intelligence operations for generations. The recognition that language characteristics could provide reliable identification tools opened new avenues for research into voice analysis, accent identification, and speech pattern recognition technologies. The systematic success of pronunciation testing at Guadalcanal created ripple effects throughout the Pacific theater that Japanese high command couldn't ignore. By October 1942, intercepted enemy communications revealed growing desperation among Japanese intelligence services. Traditional infiltration methods that had proven effective against British and Dutch forces in Southeast Asia were failing catastrophically against American linguistic defenses. Colonel Akira Yamamoto, commanding Japanese intelligence operations in the Solomon Islands, faced an impossible equation. His most skilled operatives, soldiers who had spent years studying American military culture and perfecting their English conversation skills, were being eliminated within moments of encountering American sentries. The investment of time, resources, and irreplaceable human talent was yielding virtually no intelligence return. Japanese attempts to counter the pronunciation barrier grew increasingly sophisticated and desperate. Enemy forces established specialized training facilities where infiltrators practiced English pronunciation under simulated combat stress. They recruited Japanese civilians who had lived in Hawaii or California before the war, hoping their childhood exposure to English would provide the necessary linguistic foundation. Some units even attempted to use Korean or Taiwanese soldiers, believing their different linguistic backgrounds might bypass the detection system. None of these countermeasures proved consistently effective. The neurological reality of early language acquisition couldn't be overcome through adult training, regardless of intensity or duration. Soldiers who achieved near-perfect pronunciation during practice sessions invariably reverted to native patterns when confronted with our actual American challenges under operational stress. The story of pronunciation testing at Guadalcanal stands as testament to human ingenuity under impossible circumstances. What began as desperate observation by Marines facing sophisticated infiltration attempts evolved into a systematic exploitation of linguistic reality that saved countless American lives. The single letter L, embedded in words like Lollapalooza, became more than just a security measure. It represented the power of practical innovation, the value of understanding human nature, and the remarkable ways that warfare drives unexpected discoveries. These young Marines, without advanced degrees or specialized training, identified and weaponized fundamental truths about language acquisition that academic linguists would spend decades studying. Their legacy extends far beyond the jungles of the Solomon Islands, influencing security protocols and voice analysis technologies that protect lives today. Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't forged from steel, but from the deepest patterns of human speech itself.